The difference between a predator and prey is often just a matter of who strikes first. In the heart of Chicago, inside a restaurant, dripping with old money and older blood, 5 killers walked through the door hunting for one man, Marcus Donovan, the man who destroyed the Calabrese's family. They were professionals. They were ruthless. And they had planned for everything: his security, the police response, every exit, every angle. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They dismissed the waitress, refilling their water glasses, a ghost named Katherine Pierce. They saw a servant, a nobody. They had no idea she had been waiting 15 years for this exact moment. They thought they were walking into his cage. They were walking into hers. The air inside Ella Fortezza smelled like power and secrets, not the clean scent of success, but the rich, heavy aroma of blood money, aged like the $400 bottles of Barolo lining the walls. There was imported prosciutto, sliced so thin you could see through it, hand-rolled pasta that cost more per plate than most Chicago families spent on groceries in a week, and the unmistakable undercurrent of fear that clung to every Italian restaurant in this neighborhood. Everyone knew who really owned Ella Fortezza, the Calabrese family, and everyone knew what happened to people who forgot that. For Katherine Pierce, this place was purgatory wrapped in white tablecloths. She had been working here for 11 months, serving overpriced wine to men whose hands were stained with crimes. She could only imagine, smiling politely while they spoke in code about shipments and territories and problems that needed solving. She was a ghost in a black apron, refilling water, clearing plates, and dissolving into the background so completely that the patrons never truly saw her. But here is what they didn't know. Katherine wasn't here by accident. She had chosen Ella Fortezza with surgical precision. She had applied for this job, passed the background check that the Calabrese family ran on every employee, and she had waited. Watched, learned the patterns, because Katherine Pierce had a mission, one that had consumed her for 15 years. And tonight, that mission was about to collide with a man she thought she'd never see again, a man she'd failed to protect, a man whose family died because of her. But the real shock. He was about to walk through that door in less than 60 seconds, and she had no idea why. Kate moved through the Tuesday evening crowd with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that invisibility was survival. Her steps were silent on the polished marble floors. Her hands never trembled as she balanced trays. Her face remained a perfect mask of pleasant neutrality. But her eyes never stopped moving, cataloging, analyzing, measuring. Table 42 Chicago aldermen discussing a construction bid in low voices, hands moving beneath the table to exchange an envelope. Table 7, a newly promoted captain in the Chicago PD drinking alone, trying not to look at the portrait of Vincent Calabrese hanging on the wall like a Renaissance saint. Table 9, 3 men in expensive suits who never looked at their phones, who sat with their backs to walls, whose jackets hung just slightly wrong over concealed holsters. This was her world now. A world of whispered sins and casual violence, where the line between law and lawlessness was drawn in blood and erased just as quickly. She had been Catherine Chen once, before the army, before the Black Operations Unit that didn't officially exist. She had been Lieutenant Chen, before Operation Nightingale ripped her life apart and turned her into something the government needed to forget. Now she was just Kate, the quiet waitress who was surprisingly good at remembering drink orders, and even better at staying beneath notice. She hadn't always worked at Ella Fortezza. For 7 years after Nightingale, she had drifted Settle, Portland, Denver, always moving, always alone, always running from the ghosts that followed her through sleepless nights. But 3 years ago, she stopped running. She had seen Vincent Calabrese's face on the news, accepting some civic award, smiling that cold smile, and something inside her had cracked. The son of the man whose empire she had helped destroy. The son who had rebuilt that empire on the bones of everyone Operation Nightingale had failed to save, including Marcus Donovan's wife and daughter, Ama Asil Thentiokidisiolan. Kate had never intended to face Marcus again. She had accepted that some failures were permanent, some guilt eternal. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. At precisely 8 p.m., the temperature in the room dropped. Kate felt it before she saw it, that animal instinct that had kept her alive in Kabul, in Damascus, in the black site operations that never made it into any official report. The front door opened, and the usual ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to pause just for a heartbeat. Marcus Donovan walked in like a man attending his own funeral. He was older than she remembered, 63 now, she knew, because she had tracked his life from a distance like a penitent counting sins. His hair had gone silver at the temples. Deep lines had carved themselves around his eyes and mouth, but he still carried himself with that same quiet dignity that had made him so dangerous as an FBI informant all those years ago. He wore a charcoal Brooks Brothers suit that was perfectly tailored, but not ostentatious. The uniform of old Chicago money that didn't need to prove anything. His eyes, though, those dark, intelligent eyes that had memorized every detail of Calabrese family operations. Those eyes looked haunted. Kate's heart stopped. Then it started again, hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. What the hell is he doing here? Marcus wasn't alone. Flanking him were two men who screamed professional security, broad-shouldered alert, moving with the controlled awareness of former military. The taller one, with iron-gray hair and a scar along his jaw, was scanning the room with mechanical precision. This was Robert Henderson. Kate recognized him from her research. Former Secret Service, now running Donovan's Security Systems Executive Protection Division. Competent, by the book, and about to be completely out of his depth. The Maitre D, a thin, nervous man named Paulo, who Kate knew reported directly to Vincent Calabrese, practically genuflected as he approached Marcus. "Mr. Donovan," Paulo said, his voice dripping with obsequious respect that barely masked his terror. "What an unexpected honor. Your table is ready." Your table, Kate's blood turned to ice. This wasn't random. Marcus had a reservation at La Fortezza, at the restaurant owned by the family whose patriarch he'd helped destroy. This was a setup, and Marcus had walked right into it. She watched, frozen, as Paulo led Marcus and his security detail across the restaurant, toward her section, toward Table 1, the corner booth with the panoramic view, the private exit to the alley, the table that Vincent Calabrese's father used to sit at when he held court. Of course, it was her section. Of course, Marcus slid into the booth, his bodyguards taking positions on either side. Henderson remained standing, his eyes sweeping the room in methodical arcs. Kate forced her feet to move, forced her face to remain neutral, forced 15 years of guilt and rage and grief back down into the locked box where she kept all her ghosts. She approached the table, notepad in hand, the perfect picture of a professional server. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with—" Her voice cut off as Marcus looked up at her. Their eyes met. For one terrible, infinite second, the entire world contracted to that single point of connection. She saw recognition flare in his eyes, saw shock, saw something that might have been pain or might have been rage. She couldn't tell which. His face went pale, then flushed, his hand tightening on the menu until his knuckles went white. "Katherine," he whispered. It wasn't a question. Henderson's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket. "Sir, you know this woman." Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at Kate, like she was a ghost made flesh, which, in a way, she was. Kate's training kicked in, the mask slamming back into place. "I am sorry, sir. You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Kate Pierce. Have you been to La Fortezza before?" Her voice was steady professional, giving nothing away. But inside, her mind was screaming. How does he know I am here? Did he come looking for me? Is this a confrontation? Revenge. Marcus's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then, with visible effort, he pulled himself together. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the tremor beneath it. My apologies, Miss Pierce. You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who saved my life once. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw a message she couldn't quite decode. Someone I've been looking for a very long time. I see, Kate said, her heart hammering. Well, I hope you found them. So do I, Marcus said softly. Then louder, addressing Henderson Bourbon. Pappy Van Winkle 23. Neat? And tell the chef I'll have the dry-aged ribeye, Pittsburgh rare. Henderson was still watching Kate with suspicious eyes, his training telling him something was off. But Marcus's calm demeanor seemed to reassure him. He nodded curtly, then went back to scanning the room. Kate took the orders from the two bodyguards, water for both. They were working and turned to leave. As she did, Marcus spoke again, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Katherine, whatever you are doing here, whatever you think is going to happen tonight, be ready, they know I am coming. She froze mid-step. They know. Before she could respond, before she could ask what the hell he meant, Henderson stepped between them. That'll be all, miss. Mr. Donovan requires privacy. Kate nodded and retreated, her mind reeling. Marcus knew she was here. Marcus knew Ella Fortezza was a trap, and Marcus had walked into it anyway. Why? She didn't have time to process it. Because that is when she saw them, 5 men, entering the restaurant in a staggered pattern over the next 10 minutes. To anyone else, they were just another group of well-dressed patrons, Chicago business types, out for dinner and deals. But Kate saw what others missed. She saw the pattern, the coordination, the predatory precision. Oh God! The first 2 entered together, laughing about a Cubs game, acting like old friends. They were seated at table 12, dead center of the dining room, with clear sightlines to Marcus's booth. They ordered a bottle of Chianti, but never drank it. Their conversation looked animated, but their eyes were cold, systematic, constantly sweeping the room in overlapping arcs. They weren't looking at each other. They were mapping the environment. These weren't businessmen. These were operators. The third man took a seat at the bar. He was younger than the others, maybe early 30s, with slicked, back dark hair and a face that belonged on a Renaissance painting, beautiful and cruel. He ordered a Peroni and watched the Blackhawks highlights on the screen. But Kate could see his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. He wasn't watching hockey. He was watching Henderson's bodyguard positioned near the front entrance. His focus was absolute predatory. Dante. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. Dante Calabrese, Vincent's younger brother, the enforcer, the killer. The 4th and 5th men entered last, and that is when Kate's blood turned to ice. They took table 15 right next to the kitchen entrance. A tactical position. They controlled the primary exit route, the choke point, the service corridor. One was massive, built like a linebacker, with hands that looked like they could crush a man's skull. The other was leaner, faster, moving with the fluid grace of someone trained in Krav Maga or Systema. They sat with their backs to the wall, feet flat on the floor, ready to move. Classic defensive position. There was no relaxation in their bodies, only coiled, waiting violence. Kate's training was screaming at her. This was a professional box and maneuver. Marcus was the target, and she was watching a hit unfold in real time. Her eyes darted to Henderson. He was good. She'd give him that. He'd positioned his men well, maintained situational awareness, checked the exits. But he was looking for the wrong threat. He was looking for the lone wolf, the crazed gunman, the obvious danger. He wasn't seeing the wolves dressed as sheep, mimicking the flock's behavior until it was time to feed. She had to warn him, had to try. Kate made her way toward Henderson, carrying a tray of water glasses to maintain her cover. As she passed close to him, she spoke, her voice low and urgent. "Your client is in danger." Henderson's eyes snapped to her, irritation flashing across his face. "Excuse me." "5 men," Kate whispered, keeping her expression neutral, her gaze focused just past his shoulder. "They came in separately, but they're working together. 2 at table 12, 1 at the bar, 2 by the kitchen. They're boxing you in. This is a coordinated hit." For a moment, just a moment, she saw real awareness flicker in Henderson's eyes. He was experienced enough to feel it, that shift in the air, that wrongness. But then his professional pride kicked in, the arrogance of the expert who couldn't accept a warning from a civilian. "A waitress." "Ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I appreciate your concern, but I've been protecting high-value targets for 20 years. I know what a threat looks like. Those are just customers. Now please, return to your duties and let us handle security." Kate felt frustration boil up inside her, hot and sharp. "You don't understand. Their positioning is tactical. They're not eating, not drinking, they're waiting. The man at the bar, Dante Calabrese, he is watching you in the mirror. The 2 by the kitchen are blocking your escape route. This is a professional operation." Henderson's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "How do you know Dante Calabrese?" "Shit, she'd said too much. Revealed too much." "I work here," Kate said quickly. "I know who the regulars are. I know when something's wrong." "Right?" Henderson's eyes had gone cold now, suspicious. "Well, Miss Pierce, unless you have specific credible intel about an imminent threat, I need you to back off. You're drawing attention. And if you keep harassing my client, I'll have you removed." Clear. He turned away from her. A clear dismissal. He'd already decided she was either paranoid, starstruck, or a plant trying to create chaos. The pride of the professional. The fatal flaw she'd seen get good men killed a dozen times before. Kate stood there, her hands trembling slightly as she held the tray. She looked across the room at Marcus. He was watching her. He'd seen the exchange. Their eyes met again, and this time she saw something different in his expression. He knows. He knows exactly what is happening, and he is not leaving. She could walk away. She could slip into the kitchen, out the back exit, disappear into the Chicago night before the first shot was fired. It wasn't her fight anymore. She'd left that life behind. She'd promised herself she'd never go back, never pick up a weapon, never let the violence touch her again. Marcus Donovan was a ghost from a past she'd spent 15 years trying to forget. A reminder of her greatest failure. Why should she risk everything for him? Then her eyes swept the room. The young couple at table 8, on their first date, nervous and excited. The elderly woman at table 6, celebrating her 80th birthday with her grandchildren. The waitress, Maria, who was putting herself through nursing school. The line cook, Carlos, who sent half his paycheck back to his family in Guadalajara. They were all lambs in a slaughterhouse, completely unaware that 5 wolves had just locked the doors. Her promise to herself was one thing, but her duty, that deeply carved instinct to protect the innocent. The code that had been beaten into her in Fort Bragg and Langley. That was something she could never kill. No matter how hard she tried. Kate set down the tray. Her mind shifted gears, the waitress dissolving, the operator emerging. The restaurant transformed in her vision, no longer a dining room, but a battlefield. She cataloged everything. The distance between tables, 8 feet, the weight of a wine bottle, Wu pounds. The location of the fire extinguisher by the door could blind and disorient, the knives in the kitchen, 1/8-inch chef's knife, carbon steel, the boiling water on the stove, RUR degrees, close range weapon, the heavy marble ashtray on the bar, blunt force trauma, the positioning of the civilians' evacuation routes. Everything became a weapon, every surface a tool, every angle a variable in an equation that was about to explode. From across the room, she saw it. The signal. Dante at the bar nodded. Just a tiny, almost invisible gesture. The two men at table 12 touched their earpieces simultaneously. The massive one by the kitchen cracked his knuckles. The trap was springing, and then Kate Pierce made her choice. She took a deep breath, the expensive air of Ellie Fortezza feeling thin and sharp in her lungs, and she began to move. Not as a waitress, as a soldier, as the ghost operation Nightingale had created. If you were in her position, what would you do? Run or fight? The first move was almost elegant in its brutality. Dante slid off his bar stool, his hand disappearing inside his jacket. Simultaneously, the two men by the kitchen stood up, their friendly facade evaporating like morning fog. The shift in the room's energy was instantaneous, a predator revealing itself. Henderson saw it. To his credit, his training kicked in immediately. "Get down," he roared, shoving Marcus deeper into the booth, his hand flying to the Glock under his jacket. But he was reacting. They were acting. And in combat, the difference between those two states is measured in lives. The massive man from table 15 moved with shocking speed for his size. He closed the distance to Henderson's bodyguard at the front door in 3 strides. There was no gunshot. Vincent Calabrese didn't want the police here yet, not until Marcus was secured. Instead, there was a flash of silver, a brutal upward thrust, and the bodyguard crumpled, a thin stiletto blade buried in the soft tissue under his jaw, straight up into the brainstem. Professional surgical. Instant chaos erupted. A woman screamed, high, piercing, shattering the last pretense of civility. Patrons scrambled, knocking over chairs, tables, wine glasses exploding against marble. The sound of breaking crystal and terrified shouts filled the air like a symphony of panic. The two men from table 12 moved on Henderson and his other bodyguard with practiced synchronicity, flanking them before they could even draw their weapons properly. One produced a taser-high voltage, the kind that drops a man instantly. The bodyguard at the bar convulsed and went down hard, his head cracking against the floor. Henderson was better. He got his Glock halfway out before the second attacker. The lean, fast one struck with an extendable ASP baton. He parried Henderson's draw, the steel baton cracking hard against the security chief's wrist. Bone broke with an audible snap. Henderson gasped, dropping the weapon. Another strike to the knee, precise, devastating. Henderson went down, his face twisted in agony. 10 seconds. That is all it had taken. Marcus Donovan's entire professional security detail was neutralized. The two remaining men, the ones from table 12, pulled out sleek black Sig Sauer P226S, suppressed military grade. They didn't aim at Marcus. They aimed at the ceiling, pop, 2 shots. Loud enough to be heard, quiet enough not to alert the street outside. "Nobody move," the massive one bellowed, his voice cutting through the screams. "Hands where we can see them. Stay on the floor. This doesn't concern you. We're only here for him." He gestured with his pistol toward Marcus's booth. Dante Calabrese walked forward, supremely confident, a predator who had just cornered his prey. He ignored the cowering patrons, his entire focus locked on the man huddled in the leather booth. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Marcus Donovan," he said, his accent pure Chicago Italian. "After all these years, you know. My father used to tell me stories about you, about the man who betrayed us, the man who smiled in his face and then put a knife in his back. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with Marcus. Papa died in prison, Mr. Donovan. Lung cancer. They wouldn't let me see him in his final hours because I was, how did they put it, a known criminal associate. So he died alone, scared, coughing up blood. Dante's hand shot out, grabbing Marcus by the throat, slamming him back against the booth. Do you have any idea how that feels, to have your father ripped away from you? To be left alone in this world? Marcus, to his credit, didn't flinch. His voice was steady, even with Dante's hand crushing his windpipe. Yes, he said simply. I do, because your father's men killed my wife and daughter, so yeah, Dante, I know exactly how it feels. For a moment, something flickered in Dante's eyes, surprise, maybe even recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. Then you understand, Dante whispered, why this has to happen. He reached down to haul Marcus to his feet, and that is when Kate acted. While everyone else had been screaming, diving under tables, freezing in terror, Kate had moved with purpose. She didn't run from the danger. She moved toward its periphery, using the panic as a cloak. She slid behind the long marble bar, crouching low. Leo, the young bartender, was there, trembling, his face pale with shock. Call 911, Kate whispered, her voice a blade of ice cutting through his panic. Keep the line open. Don't speak. Just put the phone down. Leo fumbled with his phone, his hands shaking too badly to dial. Kate reached over, took it, dialed with practiced speed, hit send, and slid it back into his pocket. Now stay down, she ordered. No matter what you hear, understand. He nodded frantically. Kate rose just enough to peer over the bar's edge. Her eyes swept the scene, calculating, prioritizing threats. 5 hostiles, 4 armed, Dante with a blade. Civilians scattered but mostly down, Henderson and his men neutralized. Marcus at the center, about to be dragged away. No backup, no weapons, no time, just her. Her hand closed around the neck of a bottle on the top shelf. Blanton's single-barrel bourbon, full, 750 milliliters. Heavy enough. She rose from behind the bar in one fluid motion. Hey, she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos like a gunshot. Every head turned, including Dante's. He looked at her with annoyance, seeing what everyone always saw, a waitress, a nobody. His mouth opened, probably to tell her to get down before she got hurt. He never got the chance. Kate swung the bottle in a vicious arc, putting her entire body behind it. Hips, shoulders, arms, textbook, kinetic linking. Years of close-quarters combat training guided the blow. She wasn't aiming for the head. She was aiming for the jaw, the hinge point, maximum structural damage. Dante, despite his skill, was caught completely by surprise. He jerked his head back, but the bottle still connected with a sickening crack against his mandible. The thick glass shattered, spraying bourbon and shards everywhere. Dante staggered back, roaring in pain and fury, his hand flying to his face. Blood poured between his fingers. His jaw was dislocated, maybe broken. The element of surprise was everything, and she just used all of it. The other 4 men turned their attention to her instantly. The 2 with pistols raised their weapons. The massive one started moving toward her, a cruel smile spreading across his face. The lean, fast one, the baton expert, circled around the other side of the bar, cutting off her escape. 4 trained operators against 1 waitress. You were never a waitress. A voice whispered in the back of her mind. You were always a killer. You just forgot for a while. Kate's face settled into a mask of cold, focused calm. The fear was there. It was always there. But she had learned long ago to turn it into fuel. The waitress dissolved. The mask fell away, In her place stood Lieutenant Katherine Chen, ghost operator, the woman who had survived 5 Black Ops missions that officially never happened, the woman who had been trained by the best killers the US government could produce. La Fortezza had broken open, but it wasn't Marcus who had been freed, it was her, and she was about to show them what happened when you cornered a ghost who had nothing left to lose. The restaurant fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Then all hell broke loose. But here is what those 4 killers didn't know about Katherine Pierce. She had spent 15 years running from violence. 15 years trying to forget the feeling of taking a life. 15 years convincing herself she could be normal, civilian, safe. All of that ended the moment she swung that bottle. The massive one she mentally tagged him as Tank reached her first. He was confident, sneering, probably used to intimidating people with his size alone. He swung a ham-sized fist at her head, a blow that would have knocked a normal person unconscious. Kate wasn't normal. She flowed under the punch like water, feeling the displaced air ruffle her hair. Inside his guard now, she became a controlled hurricane of violence. Her left hand shot out, grabbing his wrist and locking it with a textbook Aikido technique. Simultaneously, her right elbow drove upward with brutal precision directly under his chin, targeting the mental nerve cluster. The crack was audible across the restaurant. Tank's eyes rolled back, his massive body going limp. But Kate didn't let him fall. She twisted, using his momentum and weight, spinning him around to position his collapsing body between her and the 2 gunmen. Pop, pop, pop. The suppressed shots were soft coughs. 3 small holes appeared in Tank's expensive suit jacket. Center mass. His body jerked in her grasp from the impacts meant for her. She let him drop and vaulted over the bar in a single fluid motion, landing silently on the other side. Pistol 1, a cold-eyed professional with a Special Forces tattoo peeking from his collar, was already rounding the bar's edge, his Sig Sauer tracking her movement. He was disciplined, moving to flank, keeping his distance. Smart, but not smart enough. Kate's hand darted out, snatching a stainless steel cocktail shaker full of ice and a long bar spoon. As Pistol 1 came around the corner, weapon raised, she flung the contents of the shaker directly into his face. Ice shards and freezing gin hit his eyes, a shocking, blinding assault. He cried out instinctively, one hand flying to his face, his aim faltering for a crucial half-second. In that half-second, Kate closed the distance. She drove the pointed end of the bar spoon deep into the soft tissue of his throat, just above the clavicle, angling down toward the subclavian artery. It wasn't a kill shot. She missed the artery by millimeters, but it was incapacitating. He choked, dropping his pistol as both hands flew to his neck, a horrible gurgling sound escaping as he collapsed. Marcus Donovan watched from the booth, his mind unable to process what he was witnessing. This wasn't a fight. This was a surgical dissection. The woman he'd known as a promising young lieutenant 15 years ago had become something else entirely. Something terrifying and beautiful in its precision. 3 left now. Pistol 2, positioned near the kitchen entrance. Baton Man, circling. And Dante, back on his feet. His face a mask of bloody rage, his jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Shoot! Dante roared. His words slurred and wet from his shattered jaw. Pistol 2 had a clear line of sight, but the chaos of cowering patrons made him hesitate. Kate was already moving, weaving through overturned tables, making herself a shifting target. She grabbed a heavy linen tablecloth and flung it toward him. A simple distraction, but effective. As the cloth unfurled in the air, she didn't charge him. She charged toward the kitchen, bursting through the swinging doors just as he fired. The bullet splintered wood where her head had been a split-second before. Inside the kitchen, the world changed. The air was hot, thick with the smell of garlic, basil, and searing meat. The kitchen staff, Carlos, Maria, Two line cooks were huddled in the far corner, eyes wide with terror. "Stay down," Kate commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Her eyes scanned the space, her combat Zan-trained brain processing it as an arsenal. A rack of W-tist chef's knives, a massive stockpot of boiling pasta water, heavy cast-Zan iron skillets hanging from hooks, industrial Zan-sized canisters of sais, all for the soda fountains. A walled Zan-mounted fire extinguisher. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Baton man and pistol, two burst through the doors, fanning out to trap her. They thought they had her cornered. They were dead wrong. Kate ripped a 12 Zan-inch cast-Zan iron skillet from its hook. As Baton Man lunged, she met his charge with a full Zan force swing. The pan connected with the side of his head with a resonant clang that echoed through the kitchen like a church bell. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings unconscious before he hit the greased Zan-slicked floor. Pistol 2 hesitated just for a moment, unnerved by the brutal efficiency. That hesitation killed him. Kate grabbed the stockpot of boiling pasta water with both hands, her palms protected by her apron. With a grunt of effort, she heaved it. A tidal wave of scalding water and penna erupted toward him. His scream was inhuman high, agonized, primal. The boiling water hit his face, neck, and gun hand. He dropped the pistol, stumbling backward, clawing at his blistering skin, his features already swelling and reddening. Kate moved past him without a second glance, her hand closing around the fallen Sig Sauer. She checked the magazine with muscle memory, 12 rounds remaining, and chambered a round. She was armed now. She stepped back into the dining room, the pistol held in a perfect Weaver stance, low and ready. The room had descended into an eerie stillness. The patrons were pressed against walls, under tables, hands over their heads. Henderson was conscious, but immobilized, watching her with a mixture of awe and horror. Only one threat remained standing. Dante Calabrese had dragged Marcus from the booth, and now held him as a human shield, a jagged shard of the broken bourbon bottle pressed against Marcus's throat. A thin line of blood welled up where the glass bit into skin. "Drop the gun," Dante snarled through his ruined jaw, "or he dies." Kate raised the pistol, sighting down the barrel. Her hands were rocked and steady. Her breathing was controlled, measured. Her expression was unreadable. "You won't shoot," Dante gambled, his eyes wild with pain and desperation. "You shoot me, I slice his throat. You lose." Marcus's eyes were locked on Kate. There was no fear in them, only a strange, sad acceptance. As if he'd known it would end like this. As if he'd made peace with it years ago. Kate's voice, when she spoke, was calm. Cold, the voice of someone who had made impossible choices in impossible situations. "You made 3 mistakes, Dante." She took a small step to her left, changing the angle slightly. "First, you assumed Marcus's security was the only threat in this room." Another small step. Dante's eyes widened slightly as he realized what she was doing. She wasn't just aiming at him. She was creating a specific firing solution, calculating trajectory, windage, the exact angle needed to hit him without the glass shard falling into Marcus's carotid second. She continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You underestimated the waitress." One more step. The angle was perfect now. A clean shot to his right shoulder, the one holding the glass. 30-5 degree downward trajectory to account for the glass falling away from Marcus rather than into him. And third, she finished, her voice now a whisper that somehow carried across the entire silent restaurant. "You assumed I cared whether he lives." In the split-second that Dante's brain processed, that horrifying statement, did she really just say she didn't care if Marcus died? Kate fired. The shot was surgical. The Joe Fall M round struck Dante's right shoulder at the precise point where the humerus meets the scapula. bone shattered. His entire arm went dead, the neurological pathways severed. The glass shard fell from his nerveless fingers, clattering harmlessly to the marble floor, his body convulsed from shock and pain, his legs buckling. Before he even began to fall, Kate was moving. She didn't fire again. She closed the distance in 3 strides, reversed the pistol in her hand, and struck him across his already Zan-broken jaw with the heavy steel frame of the Sig Sauer. Dante Calabrese collapsed into an unconscious heap. Silence. The only sounds were distant sirens growing louder and the soft weeping of traumatized patrons. Kate stood over Dante's body, the pistol still held at low ready, her chest rising and falling in controlled breaths. She was no longer a waitress. She was a weapon, sleek, efficient, terrifying. She glanced at Marcus, who was slumped against the wall, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read: awe, gratitude, fear, all 3 probably. Katherine, Marcus began, his voice hoarse. "Don't," she cut him off, her voice flat. "Don't thank me. Don't ask me questions. Just don't." Because if he thanked her, if he tried to bridge that 15-year gap of guilt and grief, she didn't know if she could hold herself together. The wail of sirens crescendoed into a roar. Blue and red lights washed through the restaurant's windows. Within seconds, the front door burst open, and a flood of Chicago PD officers swarmed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Kate slowly, carefully, placed the pistol on the floor and raised her hands. Detective Frank Morrison was the first through the door, a grizzled cop in his late 50s, with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. He took in the scene with the speed of long experience. 5 bodies, 3 unconscious, 2 writhing in pain, terrified civilians, shattered furniture, and 1 small woman standing in the center of it all with her hands raised. "Chicago PD," he barked. "Nobody move. Ma'am, step away from the weapon." Kate complied smoothly, taking 3 steps back, her hands visible and open. Morrison approached carefully, his own weapon trained on her until one of his officers secured the Sig Sauer. His eyes swept the room again, lingering on each fallen attacker, noting the specific and brutal nature of their injuries. Then his gaze returned to Kate. "You do all this." His voice was carefully neutral. "They were a threat to civilians," Kate stated simply. "I neutralized the threat." Before Morrison could respond, Marcus stumbled forward, his expensive suit ruined with blood and bourbon. His face was pale, his hands still trembling, but his voice was strong. "She saved everyone," Marcus said firmly. "They were going to kill me. Maybe others. She stopped them. All of them. Alone." Morrison raised an eyebrow, looking from the diminutive woman to the 5 professional operators scattered around the restaurant. The math didn't add up. Or rather, it added up to something he didn't want to believe. "We'll need statements," Morrison said. "From both of you. And ma'am, I'm going to need to know." "She doesn't need to answer anything without counsel," Marcus interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "I'm Marcus Donovan, Donovan Security Systems. Whatever she needs, legal representation, protection, anything, it is handled. She is under my protection now." Kate's head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing. "I don't need your protection." "Maybe not," Marcus said softly, meeting her gaze. "But you're getting it anyway. After what you just did, after what you just risked. The least I can do is make sure the system doesn't crucify you for saving my life." Something passed between them in that moment, something Morrison couldn't quite identify, but recognized as significant old history. Old wounds. The next 2 hours were a blur of statements, paramedics, crime scene techs, and flashing cameras. Kate sat in a quiet corner, giving Detective Morrison a carefully curated version of events. The next 2 hours were a blur of statements, paramedics. She was Katherine Pierce, a waitress. The men attacked. She got lucky. She used what was available, pure adrenaline. She omitted every detail that spoke of training, every piece of terminology that would reveal her background, every hint that she'd done this before. Morrison listened patiently, his pen scratching across his notepad, but his eyes told a different story. A cast iron skillet, he recited, looking up at her. A bar spoon, a pot of boiling water, and a bourbon bottle. You took out 5 trained men, and they were trained. Ms. Etampil Setsin. Pierce, we've already ID'd 2 of them as former Army Rangers with kitchen supplies and bar tools. He leaned forward. And then you put a bullet through Dante Calabrese's shoulder from 20 feet away while he was holding a hostage without hitting the hostage. That is not luck, Miss Pierce. That is a very specific skill set. Kate held his gaze, her face expressionless. It was a chaotic situation, detective. Sometimes adrenaline makes you capable of things you didn't know you could do. Right. Morrison closed his notepad. Here is what I think. I think you've got a file somewhere, a thick one. Maybe military, maybe government, maybe something that doesn't officially exist. And I think someone, somewhere, went through a lot of trouble to make sure that file disappeared. He stood up. But here is the thing, Miss Pierce. You saved lives tonight, civilians. And in my book, that counts for a lot. So I am going to pretend I believe your story about the lucky waitress. But if I were you, I'd be very careful going forward. Because the kind of people who can make files disappear are also the kind of people who can make other things disappear. He walked away, leaving Kate alone with the weight of his words. Across the street, in the back of a blacked-out Mercedes S-Class, Vincent Calabrese watched the chaos unfold through tinted windows. He was nothing like his younger brother, Dante. Where Dante was hot-blooded and impulsive, Vincent was cold, calculating, patient. He wore a perfectly tailored Brioni suit, his salt and pepper hair immaculately styled, his face betraying no emotion whatsoever. Next to him sat his consigliere, an ancient man named Salvatore, who had served 3 generations of Calabreses. Dante failed. Salvatore observed, his voice like dry leaves. Dante was always going to fail, Vincent replied calmly. He let emotion cloud his judgment. I told him to wait, to be patient. But he wanted his revenge now, wanted to prove himself. And the woman, Vincent's eyes narrowed, focusing on Kate as she was escorted out of the restaurant by police. Now she is interesting. Run her face through our systems, every database we have access to. I want to know who she really is. And Donovan. Vincent smiled, a cold, terrible expression that never reached his eyes. Donovan thinks tonight was about revenge. He thinks Dante's impulsiveness was the whole plan. He pulled out his phone, opening an encrypted app. He has no idea that my brother was just a distraction. On the phone screen, a map of Chicago glowed. A small red dot pulsed in Lincoln Park. While Dante was making his dramatic scene at La Fortezza, my real team was visiting Donovan's home. His safe, his files, his secrets. Vincent zoomed in on the red dot. Everything he has been hiding for 15 years. Every piece of evidence he kept as insurance against us. All of it gone. He looked up at Salvatore. By tomorrow morning, Marcus Donovan will realize that surviving tonight was the worst thing that could have happened to him. Because now he has nothing to bargain with, no leverage, no protection. Vincent's smile widened. And that woman, Katherine Pierce, or whatever her real name is, she just painted a target on both their backs. The Calabrese family doesn't forget. And we sure as hell don't forgive. He put the phone away. Send the word. I want them both alive. Bring them to the estate. It is time Marcus Donovan learned what it really means to cross our family. The Mercedes pulled away from the curb. disappearing into Chicago's nighttime traffic. Inside LA Fortezza, Kate felt a chill run down her spine, that old combat instinct, the one that had kept her alive in a dozen war zones. This isn't over, she realized with cold certainty. This was just the beginning. They say the most dangerous place to be is between a predator and its prey. But what happens when you realize you were never the predator at all? Marcus Donovan and Katherine Pierce were about to learn that surviving the attack at LA Fortezza wasn't their salvation. It was their death sentence. Because Vincent Calabrese had been playing a completely different game. And they had just walked into checkmate. Kate woke up in a Chicago safe house that Marcus had arranged, her body aching from bruises she didn't remember getting. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind the familiar hollow feeling she'd spent 15 years trying to forget. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Now, the coffee shop on Diversey. 1 hour. Come alone. Marcus, she almost deleted it. Almost packed her go-bag and disappeared into the wind like she'd done a dozen times before. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the look in Marcus's eyes at the restaurant. Maybe it was the 15-year-old weight of guilt that refused to let her run anymore. She went. Marcus was already there, sitting in a back corner booth, 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit rumpled, his hands wrapped around the coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. Kate slid into the booth across from him. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "They got everything, Katherine." She felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "While Dante was attacking the restaurant, Vincent's real team hit my house, my safe. 15 years of evidence I'd been keeping as insurance, financial records, witness testimonies, FBI cooperation agreements. All of it gone." His voice cracked. "I was so focused on Dante, on the obvious threat, that I walked right into Vincent's trap. He sacrificed his own brother as a distraction." Kate's mind raced. Dante doesn't know. Dante's in Cook County Hospital under police guard with a shattered jaw and a destroyed shoulder. Vincent hasn't even visited him. Marcus laughed bitterly. "That is the Calabrese way. Family means everything until it doesn't." "So what now?" Marcus finally met her eyes. "Now Vincent has everything he needs to destroy me. Legally, financially, physically. Without that evidence, I have no leverage, no protection. The FBI won't touch me without proof. And Vincent knows it." He pushed a folder across the table. "But that is not why I called you here." Kate opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of her at the restaurant, at her apartment, at the safe house where she'd woken up this morning. Her blood turned to ice. "Vincent's been tracking you since the attack. He knows you are not just a waitress. He has got resources I didn't even know existed: facial recognition tied into Homeland Security databases, access to sealed military records." Marcus pulled out another photo. This one was old, grainy, taken from a military personnel file. A younger Katherine in desert camouflage, her face hard, her eyes hollow. Lieutenant Katherine Chen, Unit Ghost Operation Nightingale, Syria 2010. Kate's hands trembled as she took the photo. She could smell the dust and cordite, feel the scorching desert heat, hear the screams. Operation Nightingale, the mission that had destroyed her. "Marcus, I know what happened, Katherine," he said softly. "I've known for years. After Sarah and Emma died, I couldn't stop digging. I needed to understand why. How a simple FBI protection detail went so catastrophically wrong." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You were the ghost operator assigned to shadow my family. Level 4 clearance, authorized to use lethal force. Your job was to stay invisible, to protect us from threats the official FBI detail couldn't see coming." Kate's vision blurred. She was back there, Damascus, the safe house. The sound of breaking glass, Sarah's screams, Emma crying for her daddy. The Calabrese family had a mole in the FBI, Marcus continued, his own voice thick with emotion. Simone leaked the safe house location. When they came, your orders were to protect me first, the witness, the asset. You tried to save them all, Katherine, but there were 12 gunmen and one of you. A tear rolled down Kate's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. You killed 8 of them before they got past you. 8 trained assassins. But by the time you reached Sarah and Emma, they were already dead, Kate finished, her voice breaking. I was 30 seconds too late. 30 seconds if I'd been faster, smarter, if I'd positioned myself better. You'd be dead too, Marcus interrupted firmly. And then I'd have lost everyone. Don't you understand, Katherine? You didn't fail. The system failed. The FBI failed. I failed by trusting them. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. For 15 years, I've been looking for you, not to blame you, to thank you, to tell you that their deaths weren't your fault, that you saved my life, that you gave me a chance to bring down the Calabreses and make their sacrifice mean something. Kate pulled her hand back, shaking her head. But it didn't mean anything. They're still here, still powerful. Your evidence is gone. They won. No, Marcus said with sudden intensity. They haven't won, because there is one thing Vincent doesn't know. He leaned forward. I have a backup, a complete copy of everything they stole, but it is not in a safe or a bank or a cloud server. It is somewhere Vincent would never think to look. He tapped the scar behind his ear, the same one Kate had noticed at the restaurant. Project Chimera, a bio-integrated data storage device. Subdermal implant containing encrypted copies of every piece of evidence I've collected. Vincent thinks I am helpless, but I've been carrying my insurance policy under my skin for 3 years. Kate stared at him. Then why, tell me, why not just go to the FBI now? Because Vincent isn't going to let me walk into an FBI field office. He is coming for me tonight. His men have been tightening the net all day. Marcus's jaw set, and I am not running. Not anymore. It is time to end this. You are planning something, Kate said slowly. Something stupid. I am planning to walk into the Calabrese estate, alone, surrender myself. And in exchange for my life, I'll offer him a deal, his organization's freedom, in exchange for leaving innocent people alone. That is suicide, probably, Marcus smiled sadly. But it is the only play I have left. Vincent wants me alive, needs me alive. Actually, dead, I become a martyr. Alive, he can use me as leverage, extract the chimera implant, destroy the evidence. He thinks he has already won. Kate's mind was racing ahead, seeing the tactical picture. He'll torture you, extract the implant, kill you anyway, unless I have backup, unless someone with your skill set is already inside his estate when I arrive. Someone he doesn't know is coming. Their eyes met. I am not asking you to do this, Katherine. You've already given more than anyone had a right to ask. You can walk away, disappear. I'll never blame you. Kate was silent for a long moment, her mind at war with itself. She'd spent 15 years running from exactly this kind of mission. Swore she'd never pick up a weapon again, never let the ghost out of its cage. But Marcus was right about one thing. Operation Nightingale had never truly ended. Not for her. The guilt, the nightmares, the faces of Sarah and Emma haunting her every quiet moment, it had all been leading here, to this choice. This moment, redemption or damnation. Tell me about the estate, she finally said. Security, layout, personnel, everything. Marcus exhaled, relief and fear mixing in his expression. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Kate replied, her voice hardening into something cold and lethal. Because if we're doing this, we're not just surviving, Marcus, we're ending the Calabrese family tonight. Forever. The Calabrese estate sat on 20 acres of prime Chicago lakefront property, hidden behind high walls and old trees. To the public, it was a historical mansion. To those who knew, it was a fortress. Kate approached from the water at midnight, a wetsuit and rebreather, allowing her to swim, undetected to the private dock. Marcus had provided blueprints, security schedules, everything he'd memorized from his years of FBI cooperation. She emerged from Lake Michigan like a ghost, water streaming off her dark ear. The dock had 2 guards, both bored, both smoking cigarettes. They never saw her coming. 20 seconds later, both were unconscious, zip-tied, and hidden behind a storage shed. Kate stripped off the wetsuit, revealing tactical black underneath. She'd acquired the gear from an old contact, someone who knew better than to ask questions. Her earpiece crackled. "Marcus, right on schedule." "I am at the front gate," his voice whispered. "They're letting me in." "Copy," Kate replied. "I am inside the perimeter, heading to the main house." She moved through the shadows like smoke, avoiding cameras using dead zones in the patrol patterns Marcus had identified. The estate's security was good but predictable. They were prepared for assault from outside, not infiltration from within. Within 10 minutes, she was inside the mansion itself, moving through servant corridors toward the central wing, where Vincent conducted his business. Vincent Calabrese sat in his father's old study, a room that smelled of leather and cigar smoke and old violence. Marcus Donovan stood before him, hands zip-tied, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Marcus," Vincent said warmly, as if greeting an old friend, "thank you for coming. It saves me the trouble of dragging you here." "Let's skip the theater, Vincent," Marcus replied tiredly. "You want the chimera implant. I want guarantees that you'll leave innocent people alone. We can negotiate." Vincent laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "Negotiate? Marcus, you have nothing to negotiate with. I already have everything." He gestured, and one of his guards placed a laptop on the desk, showing surveillance footage of Kate entering the estate. "Including your guardian angel, Miss Katherine Chen. Or should I call her ghost?" Marcus's face went pale. Vincent stood, walking around the desk. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this? That I wouldn't prepare for the legendary ghost operator to attempt a rescue?" He pressed a button on his desk. All around the estate, lights blazed to life. Armed men emerged from hiding positions. Infrared targeting lasers painted the walls. "I've been hunting you, Miss Chen," Vincent called out, his voice amplified through speakers. "Ever since you humiliated my brother. Ever since you revealed yourself to be more than a waitress." Through her earpiece, Kate heard Marcus whisper, "Run, please, just run." She ignored him. Instead, she stepped out of the shadows, her hands raised but empty, walking calmly into Vincent's study. "I am here," she said simply. "Let him go." Vincent smiled. "How noble, how predictable. You know, my father always said that heroes were just people too stupid to run when they should." He pulled out a pistol, a gold-plated 1911, gaudy and ostentatious. "Here is how this will work. First, I'll extract the chimera implant from Marcus. Then I'll kill you both slowly and bury you where no one will ever find you." "Any last words?" Kate smiled. It was a cold, terrifying expression. "Just 3. Check your accounts." Vincent frowned. "What?" "In the last hour, while you were so focused on us, someone very talented has been systematically draining every offshore account, every shell corporation, every hidden asset your family controls. By my estimate, you've lost about $200 million so far." Vincent's face went white. He grabbed his phone, frantically opening banking apps. His hands began to shake. "How? Marcus isn't just a witness, Vincent. He built security systems for half the Fortune 500. You think he didn't keep back doors? That he didn't spend 15 years mapping your entire financial empire? Marcus picked up the thread, his voice stronger now. Every dollar you stole, every account you hid, I knew about it. And 30 minutes ago, I released the Chimera data. Not to the FBI, to every major news organization, to WikiLeaks, to the IRS, to Interpol. He smiled grimly. By sunrise, the Calabrese family will be front-page news. Your assets frozen, your organization in shambles, and you'll be the man who destroyed everything your father built. Vincent's face twisted with rage. He raised the pistol, aiming at Marcus's head. Then you'll die knowing I won. Kate moved. She'd been counting guards, measuring distances, waiting for the perfect moment. As Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger, she grabbed the wrist of the guard beside her, twisted, and fired his weapon in a single fluid motion. The shot took Vincent in his gun hand. The golden 1911 clattered to the floor. Chaos erupted. What happened next was less a fight than a whirlwind. Kate became what she'd spent 15 years trying not to be, a ghost operator at full capacity, unleashed and unstoppable. She used the guard's own weapon to drop two more, rolled behind Vincent's desk as bullets tore through the wood, came up firing. Glass shattered. Men shouted. Someone triggered an alarm. Marcus, hands still bound, threw himself behind cover as the study became a war zone. Kate moved through it like a dancer, efficient and lethal. Disarm, strike, move, pistol empty. She threw it, the heavy steel catching a guard in the throat. Grabbed a letter opener from the desk, 8 inches of steel, sharp enough. Another guard down. Vincent was scrambling for his fallen pistol. Kate kicked it away, then struck him across the face with her elbow. He went down hard. Within 90 seconds, every guard in the room was incapacitated or dead. Kate stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't hers. She walked to Marcus, cut his zip ties with the letter opener. He stared at her, this woman who just destroyed 6 armed men with nothing but improvised weapons and pure skill. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "I am now," he replied. Vincent groaned, trying to rise. Kate pressed her foot against his chest, pushing him back down. "The FBI is 3 minutes out," Marcus said, checking his phone. "I triggered the distress beacon when the shooting started." Vincent laughed weakly, blood on his teeth. "You think this ends my family? We've survived worse. We always come back." "Not this time," Kate said coldly. She pulled the Chimera data drive from Marcus's pocket. He'd removed it before surrendering, and held it up. "Every crime, every murder, every bribe, everything." She looked down at Vincent with eyes that had seen too much death to fear giving it. "Your father died in prison alone. Your brother will spend his life in a wheelchair with a jaw wired shut, and you'll rot in a cell, watching everything you built turn to dust." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "That is justice, Vincent, not revenge, justice." Kate stood on the balcony of Marcus's penthouse, watching the Chicago sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and amber behind her. She could hear him on a phone call with his lawyers. The trial was set to begin next week. The Calabrese family's empire had collapsed exactly as Marcus predicted. He joined her on the balcony, 2 cups of coffee in hand. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up. The prosecutor called. Marcus finally said, "They want you to testify about Operation Nightingale, about everything." Kate nodded slowly. "I know I'll do it." "You don't have to. They have enough without." "I need to," she interrupted gently. "For Sarah, for Emma, for every ghost I've been running from. It is time to stop running." Marcus smiled, real warmth in his eyes for the first time in years. "So what is next?" After the trial, Kate considered. For 15 years, she'd been a ghost. Before that, a weapon. Maybe it was time to be something else. Someone else. Donovan Security Systems is hiring, right? Marcus laughed, a real laugh, free and unburdened. For you. Always. Although I have to warn you, the dress code is business casual, not tactical black. I think I can manage that. They clinked coffee mugs, watching the sun rise over a city that felt, for the first time in a long time, like it might actually be home. The ghosts weren't gone. They never would be. But maybe, just maybe, Kate had finally found a way to live with them. And that, after everything, was enough.